sorry, Jack, but this is just how things have to be these days. Corporate needs the numbers to look better on paper. That's what my supervisor Ron told me on a rainy Tuesday morning as he handed me the termination letter across the scarred surface of his desk. I was still in my blue coveralls, hands stained from checking the chlorine transfer pump just 2 hours earlier. The words sounded almost apologetic, but his eyes didn't meet mine. He kept glancing at the HR rep in the corner, like she might disappear if he blinked. I didn't argue. I didn't slam the door or ask what the real reason was. I just sat there for a long second, looking at the familiar stains on the safety report folder I'd carried in, and then said, "So that's it?" Ron shifted in his chair. "It's not personal. Things are tight. You'll get your final paycheck and payout for unused vacation in the mail. Should only take a few days." I nodded, gathered my things, and walked out into the dull light of the parking lot. That was the official version. The real reason? I knew the second I saw the new clipboard on Ron's desk, the one marked Priority Cleanup, because 6 days earlier, I'd filed a full incident report about a toxic leak on line 2, with copies sent to the plant manager and safety committee. The leak wasn't catastrophic, but it could have been, and everyone in the building knew why. Maintenance budget slashed, parts temporarily replaced, corners cut. I'd documented every warning, every checklist. That was my job, after all. My name is Jack Miller. I'm 49, and for 15 years I worked as a senior technician at ChemGrow Processing in Green Bay, Wisconsin. You probably don't know ChemGrow, but you drive past our tanks on I-41, the ones painted green to look eco-friendly. I kept my head down, made sure nothing exploded, and kept the line running for a crew of 36. My proudest record, 15 years, 0 shutdowns from an accident. Not once did I look away from a problem. I started there in my 30s, just a guy who liked tinkering with pumps and knew the difference between a real fix and a patch job. Over the years, I watched 3 plant managers cycle through, dozens of new hires come and go, and more safety memos pile up on the break room fridge than actual safety upgrades on the floor. But I stuck with it, because I believed in the job and in the people who showed up at dawn, day after day. Everything changed the day I found a puddle of yellowish liquid under the main transfer line. I traced it back to a hairline crack in the valve housing, one we'd flagged in a maintenance report nearly 3 weeks before. I checked the logs. My signature was there, with a note, "Recommend immediate replacement. Risk of corrosive leak." Nobody had signed off on the work. Nobody had ordered the part. The only thing that changed was that the sticker on the pump was wiped off and replaced with a new checked OK tag. That morning, after my shift ended, I sent a full incident report to my supervisor and the safety committee, attached with digital photos, checklists, and a copy of the sensor log. I'd seen enough near misses to know when to cover myself. Within 48 hours, the leak had doubled in size. I reported it again, and the next day, at 7:24 a.m., a low-level toxic vapor alarm triggered. We evacuated one section, ran emergency ventilation, and flushed the system. Nobody got hurt, not this time. I thought that was the end of it. Fix the valve, file the paperwork, and move on. But 2 days later, I got called into Ron's office and handed my walking papers. "Just optimization," he said. "You'll get everything you're owed." Except I didn't. A week after my termination, I checked my bank account. Nothing from ChemGrow, no final paycheck, no unused vacation payout. I waited 2 more days, still nothing. I called HR. "There must be a processing delay," the woman on the line said. "We'll look into it." The same afternoon, a heavy white envelope landed in my mailbox. Return address, ChemGrow Legal. Inside was a copy of a report to OSHA. I recognized it instantly, except it didn't look like the one I'd sent. This one claimed that the toxic leak occurred due to operator negligence, and my name was highlighted on every page. It accused me of bypassing safety procedures and failing to escalate urgent maintenance. Buried in the legalese, I saw the real threat: potential disqualification from future safety-sensitive work under federal guidelines. In plain English, they wanted me blacklisted. I sat at the kitchen table for an hour, rereading that report until my eyes burned. I'd seen companies do dirty things before, but I never thought they'd come after me like this. I felt a slow, cold anger in my chest, not just for myself, but for every person still showing up at 5:30 a.m. to keep that place running. But I wasn't helpless. I had every email, every signed checklist, every sensor log with a time and date stamp. I'd kept hard copies and backed up the files to my personal drive the day after the leak. I had photos of the valve, close-ups of the corrosion, and even a time-stamped text message from my shift lead confirming he saw my report and tried to follow up. I wasn't planning to go quietly. First, I filed 2 complaints, one to OSHA for whistleblower retaliation, and one to the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development for unpaid wages. I attached everything, emails, maintenance logs, even my final time card. Then I called 3 of my crew, Dave from night shift, Lisa from QA, and Rico from maintenance. I told them what happened. If anyone asks, will you back me up? They all said yes, without hesitation. Rico said, we all knew Ron was going to cover his ass. I saw him throw your report in the shred bin. Lisa emailed me a copy of her daily QA log. Dave, who'd been in the control room the night of the leak, offered to testify that the alarms went off exactly as I said. Next, I reached out to a local news producer I knew from my daughter's soccer team. He covered industrial safety for the regional station. I gave him the photos, the original report, and a copy of the fake one. Within a week, the story ran at 6 p.m. Plant technician blames management for toxic leak and retaliation. ChemGrow's spokesperson tried to deny everything, but the segment included the photos and sensor data. That's when things really started moving. The Union Legal Fund assigned me a labor attorney who immediately filed a defamation suit against ChemGrow and named both Ron and the HR manager in the filing. I never thought I'd need a lawyer for telling the truth at work, but the first time I sat in his office, he said, "You did everything right. Let's make them prove otherwise." A few days after the TV report, OSHA investigators arrived at the plant unannounced. They found 7 critical violations: missing safety shields, out-of-date chemical logs, and a stack of signed-off maintenance jobs that had never actually been done. The plant shut down that section for inspection. ChemGrow's management started sweating. The regional news kept running updates. The union staged a rally outside the main gate. A week later, ChemGrow's biggest client, a packaging giant in Chicago, put their contract on indefinite hold. Rumors started about layoffs. By then, I'd already heard from a competing chemical plant across town. Their head of safety called me up. "We saw the story. You looking for work? We could use someone who knows how to keep a place running right." I tried not to let the relief show in my voice. I'd be happy to talk. It wasn't over yet, though. The Department of Workforce Development ruled in my favor. ChemGrow had to pay my full back wages, plus 50% penalty for late payment, and an additional sum for emotional distress. OSHA cited the company for multiple violations, including falsifying records and retaliating against a whistleblower. They fined the company 6 figures and recommended federal oversight for at least 2 years. But the real moment came in court, when my lawyer laid out the maintenance logs, the emails, the photos, and the statements from Dave, Lisa, and Rico. The judge didn't even let ChemGrow's lawyer finish her cross-examination before ruling. Mr. Miller acted in good faith to prevent a workplace hazard. The company's actions were retaliatory and defamatory. I order ChemGrow to issue a public apology and pay damages. I took the job at the competing plant, this time as safety manager. First thing I did was rewrite all the reporting protocols. No more clean up and keep quiet. A year later, I was invited to speak at a regional safety I told the crowd, document everything, save your records. It might not just save your job, it could save a life. Sometimes the right thing isn't, but if you do it long enough, the truth eventually finds its way to the surface. The first morning at my new job felt nothing like the ones I'd woken up to for the past 15 years. The alarm still buzzed at 5:30 a.m., but this time, there was no pit in my stomach. I made coffee, dressed in a crisp shirt that still smelled faintly of the department store, and drove across town to the rival chemical plant. A place that, until recently, I only knew from highway billboards and stories traded over lunch breaks. Now, thanks to everything that had happened, I was walking through the main gates as their new head of safety and compliance. I kept expecting someone to look at me sideways, to ask about the news stories, the lawsuits, or my old supervisor's threats. But instead, the security guard just nodded, handed me a fresh badge, and smiled. "Good to have you, Jack." For the first time in months, I believed it. There was a learning curve, of course. Every plant has its own quirks, its own hazards, and a dozen unwritten rules about who you trust for the real story. My first week was all paperwork, walking the floor, making lists of safety gear and maintenance record, trying to spot the small things other people walked right past. But everywhere I turned, people seemed less guarded, more willing to talk. A couple of the line operators even mentioned they'd seen my name in the news, and in a tone that sounded more like respect than suspicion. "Heard you stuck your neck out," one said, pressing a hard hat into my hands. "That takes guts." It felt good, being recognized for doing the right thing, instead of being punished for it. Of course, there were still nights when I'd lie awake replaying the chaos of those last weeks at my old job. The meetings, the shouting, the waiting for checks that never came, the way even close friends started avoiding me in the lunchroom, worried they'd be next. Some scars stick longer than others, but now at least I wasn't carrying them. The legal process, meanwhile, dragged on in the background, slow and steady. The union's lawyers kept me updated. OSHA's investigation spun into a full-scale audit, with the plant shut down for nearly 2 months. Former colleagues called, sometimes just to vent, sometimes to ask for advice. I told them what I'd learned. Keep every email, every checklist, every log, no matter how small. "Trust is good," I said, "but proof is better." The day the judgment came in, I was back at my new plant, elbow deep in a valve inspection. My phone buzzed with a message from the union lawyer. "Jack, we won. Back pay, penalty, and they've got to make a public statement. It's over." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. After so much fighting, so much waiting, it almost didn't feel real. I sent a quiet thank you, then finished the inspection and moved on. The plant had to keep running after all. The following week, my old employer's official apology ran in the city paper and went up on their website. It was dry and legalistic. "We regret the circumstances that led to Mr. Miller's termination." But that wasn't the part that stuck with people. It was the local news, the union statement, and a grainy photo of my handwritten maintenance logs with the dates circled in red. The real story had already spread through the industry, in break rooms and barbecue, in union meetings and HR seminars. If you want to avoid a disaster, hire someone like Jack Miller and listen to what he says. A few months later, the chemical plant where I'd spent half my life was still struggling to recover. The fines had hurt, but the real blow was reputational. One of their biggest clients put the contract on hold, and another moved their business elsewhere. Some folks blame me, I'm sure, but most knew the truth. The rot had started long before the leak. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel guilty either. In the meantime, things at my new job settled into a routine. We overhauled inspection protocols, added digital logs, and started regular safety workshops. Simple changes, really, but they made a difference. After a while, people stopped talking about the old news and just started talking about the work. That was how I liked it. The biggest surprise came in the spring, almost a year to the day after my firing. OSHA held their annual industry conference in Milwaukee, and I was asked to give a talk. The room was packed with plant managers, safety officers, even a few journalists. I kept my notes short. I didn't mention my old boss or the lawsuit. Instead, I just told my story, plain and simple. If you're the person with the checklist, the logbook, the late-night email, keep them. If you're the person with the power to fix something, do it. If you're asked to look the other way, remember, one day it might be your name in the report, or your family in the news. Documentation doesn't just protect your company, it protects you, and it can save lives. Afterwards, people lined up to shake my hand, ask questions, or just say they'd been through something similar. A younger tech from a plant outside Madison stopped me on my way out. thanked me for not sugarcoating it, and asked if I'd look over their new maintenance logs. I said I'd be happy to. That felt like closure, more than any check or apology. Life didn't get easier overnight, but it got better, steadier. I still kept my old hard hat on a hook in my garage, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Standing up for what's right costs something, sometimes more than you expect. But some things, like your name and your peace of mind, are worth the fight. And now, whenever a new hire asks why we keep such detailed records, or why I insist on triple-checking the emergency shutoff procedures, I just smile and say, trust me, it's not about being paranoid. It's about making sure the next Jack Miller won't have to fight the same battles alone. Not everything about starting over was easy. Some days, the routines of the old place crept back in. I'd reach for a door handle in the new plant and find it in the wrong spot, or glance at a faded wall clock and expect to hear the voice of my old supervisor barking out a sarcastic, "Let's go, Miller." But gradually, the ghosts faded. I started to wake up looking forward to work, not dreading it. At home, the changes were even more noticeable. My wife, Lynn, finally stopped checking the mailbox every day for letters from lawyers or past due notices. She'd gotten used to the stress, the endless calls, the anxiety over whether my reputation would ever recover, the fear I'd be blacklisted for good. Now she smiled more. Sometimes she'd slip an arm around my waist and say, "Feels like I have my husband back." And the truth was, she did. The settlement money from the lawsuit wasn't a fortune, but it helped. We replaced the battered old Chevy, caught up on some house repairs, even took a weekend trip up to Door County, just the two of us, a tiny cabin on the lake, a campfire, and the peace that comes after surviving a storm. But the biggest reward was simpler than any payout. I got my self-respect back. I could walk into a room, look people in the eye, and know I'd done the right thing even when it cost me. Lynn liked to joke that I was the most famous whistleblower on the block, and I'd laugh. But sometimes I'd think about how close I'd come to just letting it slide, just keeping my head down. If I'd done that, I might still have my old job, but I'd never have been able to sleep at night. Work at the new plant kept me busy. We had our share of problems: clogged valves, cranky old machinery, the usual parade of surprise inspections and budget headache. But there was a difference in how problems got handled. When someone spotted corrosion on a pipe, they reported it, and I listened. When a junior operator flagged a pressure reading that seemed off, nobody rolled their eyes or told him to stop worrying. We fixed it, logged it, and moved on. Some of my old crew from Green Bay even called for advice. I did my best to help, not out of revenge, but because I knew what it felt like to be left hanging. A couple even came over to work with me. One of them, Luis, brought his teenage son to visit the plant on Take Your Child to Work Day. "This is Jack," Luis told him. "The reason I'm still in this business." I felt a lump in my throat, hearing that. News of my story kept popping up in industry circles. I started getting invited to local safety panels, Zoom calls with union reps, even the occasional classroom at the tech college. I never pretended to be a hero. I just explained what I'd learned, the hard way, that standing up for safety is never just about pipes and valves. It's about protecting the people who trust you to get them home safe every night. It was during one of those talks at a small community college that I really saw how far things had come. A young woman in the front row, maybe 19 or 20, with a spiral-bound notebook full of highlighted checklists, raised her hand. "Mr. Miller, my uncle says speaking up is risky, that the company will just find a way to get rid of you if you cause trouble. Did you ever wish you just kept quiet?" I thought about it for a long moment, then shook my head. "No," I said, "I didn't. There were days I was scared, sure, but if you let fear decide for you, you end up stuck, and things get worse for everyone. Find the right people, keep your records, and don't ever let anyone tell you your safety or your integrity isn't worth fighting for." Afterwards, she came up to thank me, and I saw in her eyes the same mixture of anxiety and hope I'd carried all those months. I realized then that stories like mine weren't just warnings. They were reminders that it's possible to survive and even thrive after doing the hard, right thing. A year went by. My old plant never really recovered from the scandal. Their biggest clients stayed away. Some of the worst managers quietly retired. Others were reassigned. The company announced a new era of transparency, but the people who had worked there the longest said it was too little, too late. Meanwhile, my new plant's safety numbers started climbing, and other companies reached out for advice on how to update their protocols. I wrote an article for the industry newsletter. Nothing flashy, just a checklist, and a few lines about why details matter. It got passed around, quoted, and even landed me an invite to an industry roundtable in Chicago. That summer, OSHA invited me back to speak at their conference again. This time, instead of a small side room, my session was on the main stage. Lynn came along, sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. I finished my talk with the same advice I'd given 100 times, but now I knew people were actually listening. I still kept my routines: early mornings, strong coffee, regular logbook checks. I still walked the floor, talked to every shift, and checked every last pressure gauge myself. Old habits, maybe, or maybe just the habits that keep people safe. Sometimes I'd drive by my old plant, see the faded sign, and think about everything I'd lost. But then, I'd look at my new badge, remember all the people who'd reached out, and realize how much I'd gained. Maybe that's what it means to win. Not to get everything back, but to know, deep down, you never lost what really mattered.